Nikki says, hi, Raphael, is it safe to practice full range of motion of the neck to extension and flexion if you have cerebellum tonsil ectopia? Do you have any experience of clients who've been able to exercise normally despite the condition? Many thanks, Nikki. So, Nikki, the answer is I have not had any clients with that condition, and I had to look up what the heck it was, and now I have learned something. It's also called Chiari-1 malformation, as described more than 100 years ago by Dr. Hans Chiari. A Chiari-1 malformation consists of a herniation of the cerebellar tonsils. So basically the base of your brain, at the very base of your brain, the brain stem it's called, you've got this kind of little mini brain that sits under there, and that's called the cerebellum, and that is basically where your spinal cord exits your skull through a big hole in the skull called the foramen magnum, and then goes into your spinal column, and so cerebellar ectopia, also called Chiari-1 malformation, is where basically the bottom of the cerebellum kind of bulges out down through the foramen magnum, or in other words, herniates, because to herniate simply means where a body part bulges out of or into another body part. So in this case, it's the bottom of the cerebellum, the bottom of the base of the brain, bulging out of the skull and down into the spinal column. So what sits directly beneath the foramen magnum is your C1, your top vertebra in your neck, your top cervical vertebra. And so then the cerebellum is protruding down from the skull into the C1, and so the articulation, the joint between the C1 and the skull, is where you get a lot of your flexion and extension from in your neck, and also the C1, C2 joint. And so the question is a really good one. Does this influence, whether this person should be doing flexion and extension with their neck if part of their brainstem is kind of herniated down into the C1? So here's what I found, that basically a large portion of people who have this condition are asymptomatic, and the general consensus amongst the literature seems to be that for asymptomatic people, physical restrictions are not necessary. So basically, if there are no symptoms associated with the condition, you should probably just continue about your business as usual. And the physical restrictions that they do advocate are basically contact sports. So for people who have symptoms, they advocate physical restrictions, no contact sports. And you can probably imagine why that wouldn't be a good plan. So I didn't find any mention of flexion or extension in terms of physical restrictions. Now, the symptoms that can happen can be, fairly diverse, and it can restrict the flow of cerebrospinal fluid from the brain case down into the spine, and can also compress the cerebellum and the spinal cord. So you can have kind of muscle wastage, you can have diverse central nervous system symptoms as a result of the lack of flow of cerebrospinal fluid. So if you're getting any of those symptoms, I would just basically pay attention to whether the flexion and extension seems to aggravate them or not. And you could do things like recording, symptom levels, before a workout, then after a workout, and doing that over a period of, days or weeks and seeing if there was any pattern there. But basically, I think, as long as you're not playing rugby league, you're probably fine. And I would hope and assume that you're in touch with a medical professional and potentially a surgeon, because surgery does seem to be an indicative for a lot of these situations. So I hope that helps.